Viva 9. What can we learn about living the good life by studying the lives of Socrates and Alcibiades? Nowadays, when people think about the good life, they think about it in materialistic terms, namely how they can make money. However, both Socrates and Alcibiades pursued their good life very differently, both in their individual ways. They, through their individual experiences, can teach us how to live the good life. First, through the lives they lived. Secondly, through the work they accomplished. And thirdly, through the way they met their ends. My first point is that both Alcibiades and Socrates both pursued their good life through non-materialistic things. Socrates pursued virtue by learning, and Alcibiades pursued pleasure. We can see this by their very different lives and subsequent childhoods and subsequent lives. Anyway, because they both lived at the same time and were in fact very good friends, but they still lived very different lives. Alcibiades was a nephew of Pericles. He was brought up wealthy. There are many stories of his childhood. For instance, once, though very small, he was wrestling with another kid. Because he was losing, he began to bite the other child, and the child began to lose blood. Then, to ridicule Alcibiades, he said, "You fight like a girl." Alcibiades returned, "No, I fight like a lion." Alcibiades also banned flutes from his school because he thought they looked funny, and when you played it, and because you couldn't sing at the same time. So he told this to all the other students, and because he was so admired, they agreed with him. And so none of them wanted to play the flute. He was very impulsive and loved getting attention. When he was a young man, once he bought a beautiful dog for about $30,000 in today's money. But then, as soon as he got the dog, he chopped off its tail, and everyone was pretty mad about this. But in fact, he did this so that Athens had nothing worse about him to talk about. Socrates, on the other hand, was middle class and a stonemason. He learned rhetoric from Aspasia, who was Pericles' mistress, basically. She was highly esteemed and was one of the few actually educated women. While Alcibiades was always very handsome and good-looking, Socrates was super ugly. He never showered and would wear dirty clothes. Deborah Nail says, quote, "He had wide-set, bulging eyes that darted sideways and enabled him, like a crab, to see not only what was straight ahead, but what was beside him as well," unquote. So this was just one of Socrates' ugly features. My second point is that both Socrates and Alcibiades pursued their views of the good life throughout their careers. Both Socrates and Alcibiades fought in the Peloponnesian War. They were tent mates and foot soldiers, so they were comrades in action. In one battle, Alcibiades was wounded, and Socrates saved his life by protecting and standing over him throughout the battle. Thus they became friends. Alcibiades soon rose to power as a general because of his great family connections, and that basically everyone loved him and wanted to please him. He was able to propose a military agenda to the assembly, but we'll get back to that later. After one sea battle, called the Battle of Arginusae, 6 captains and commanders were being charged for forgoing to rescue a number of shipwrecked sailors. Instead of shipwrecked soldiers, I guess. Instead, they decided to pursue the Spartan fleet, which was already defeated. but they were able to catch up to the Spartans and to defeat their fleet. But they returned to Athens to public outrage. Socrates was a member of the assembly, whose majority decided upon capital punishment, saying that the commanders failed to uphold the most basic of duties because they left these soldiers to die. However, Socrates blocked the vote, saying, according to Xenophon, the historian, that, quote, in no case would he act except in accordance with the law, unquote. This fundamental belief of Socrates would continue to guide his decisions throughout his life and death. Socrates continued to pursue truth in philosophy and gained fame. Meanwhile, Alcibiades tried to persuade the Athenians to invade Sicily. However, before he could set off, he was held suspect for destroying some statues of Hermes and some other horrible acts. However, he was allowed to sail to try and take Sicily before the trial, but he was soon recalled. Fearing that he would be sentenced to death, Alcibiades fled to Sparta, where he was very much admired and easily fit in, acting just as the Spartan did. However, the king of Sparta, who was in charge of protecting him from the Athenians, soon got very mad when Alcibiades got his wife pregnant. So then Alcibiades fled to Persia. My third point is that the ways that both Socrates and Alcibiades met their deaths can show us their views of life. As Socrates grew older, many of the Athenians began to distrust him because his teachings became anti-democratic, and they were suspicious of the way that both he and his students had Spartan tendencies in their way of dressing. They charged him of atheism and corrupting the youth. He was found guilty, and when the jury asked Socrates what he thought his punishment should be, Socrates sarcastically suggested that he should be awarded with free meals. But he was sentenced to death because they evidently didn't think that it was that funny. He was given an opportunity to escape, but he argued that if he didn't obey Athens, his life would be meaningless, and that he would be punished in the afterlife. Most differently, Alcibiades never showed allegiance to his country, as Russell Meigs says about him, quote, his advice, whether to Athens or Sparta, oligarchs or democrats, was dictated for selfish motives, unquote. So traveling back to Persia, Alcibiades' luck finally ran out. He was found in a cottage by a team of assassins, likely sent by Sparta. They killed him by shooting many arrows into him as he tried to escape from the house they had set on fire. In conclusion, unlike most people nowadays who gained value from life in materialistic ways, Alcibiades and Socrates approached life very differently. Socrates through learning and Alcibiades through pleasure and success. Their lives provide us insights into what the good life actually is, through, first, the lives they lived, secondly, the work they accomplished, and thirdly, the way they met their ends. Thank you.